Good morning. Thank you all for joining the Ex-Im Bank hearing. Mr. Jovanovic, thank you for being with us this morning. We're here today to talk about the importance of the Ex-Im Bank. And in its core, this hearing is about whether we will stay competitive with China and strengthens American small businesses at home. The committee has the important task of reauthorizing Ex-Im Bank this year, and today's discussion is an important part of that process. China is aggressively financing its industries and exporting its influence across the globe. In emerging markets, China is shaping supply chains, setting standards, and advancing its national interests at our expense. China is also making long-term investments in its domestic economy to dominate the industries of tomorrow. We cannot afford to sit on the sidelines. We must ensure that American companies have the tools to compete globally. That's where the Ex-Im Bank plays an important and strategic role. The bank gives American businesses the backing they need to compete in strategic sectors like energy, critical minerals, and advanced technologies. In many instances, these companies are competing with foreign peers with aggressive export credit financing of their own. Ex-Im Bank also helps the U.S. workforce alongside our allies and partners to build more resilient supply chains and reduce dependence on adversaries. For example, under your leadership, one out of every 4 of the bank's transactions last year targeted projects that directly advance U.S. competition against China, and that's a good thing. I applaud you and the President for playing a critical role in confronting China's economic aggression and securing America's position as the world's greatest and leading economy. But competitiveness abroad starts with strength at home. Just as important, Ex-Im Bank supports jobs and economic growth domestically. Across the country, small businesses and manufacturers rely on access to global markets to grow, hire, and invest in their communities. Many small businesses in the U.S. do not have the resources to take on large export contracts without support. Ex-Im helps bridge that gap. In South Carolina alone, we have seen that firsthand. In the last 10 years in South Carolina, Ex-Im Bank has supported 68 exporters, including small businesses across our state, helping to export roughly $9 billion. So many people know Boeing and Ex-Im Bank, but they missed the other 64 small businesses that are absolutely dependent on the relationship they have with the Ex-Im Bank. They represent real estate, real businesses, real workers, and real communities that depend on the ability to compete and succeed in the global economy. Ex-Im Bank also works through community lenders and local financial institutions, helping ensure that smaller companies, not just large corporations, have access to the capital they need to succeed. Nearly 90% of Ex-Im's transactions directly support small business exports, reinforcing the strength of America's entrepreneurial backbone and expanding opportunity in communities across the country. At the same time, we must be clear about what Ex-Im Bank is and also clear about what it is not. It is not a grant program at all. Ex-Im Bank provides loans and guarantees that are repaid, and it has returned nearly $10 billion to the Treasury over the last 3 decades. That is an important point, one of great contention, but the bottom line is that the Ex-Im Bank consistently and continues to deliver for the American taxpayer, making our nation stronger, more resilient, and frankly, keeping us in the black, which is a very positive part of your role at the Ex-Im Bank, something we can all be very proud of. As we consider reauthorization, we also have a responsibility to ensure Ex-Im continues to work as effectively as possible, increasing efficiency in the deal-making process and minimizing risk to the taxpayer. That means improving staffing, streamlining operations and reducing unnecessary delays so American businesses are not left waiting while the competitors move forward. It also means ensuring the bank is nimble enough to respond to a rapidly changing global economy while maintaining strong oversight and accountability. We have an opportunity to strengthen EXIM so it can better support American workers, strengthen our supply chains, and advance our economic security. Done right, reauthorization will help ensure that the United States remains the most competitive and innovative economy in the world. I look forward to hearing from you today about how EXIM Bank can continue to deliver for the American people and how Congress can help position the bank for success in the years to come. Senator Warren, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. The Export-Import Bank can be a valuable tool for facilitating exports and for supporting small businesses and American workers in some of our most critical industries. At its best, the bank can help ensure we build more things here in America. EXIM can help us rebuild our manufacturing base and reshore key supply chains. With this reauthorization, we have an opportunity to make sure that we're structuring EXIM lending in a way that achieves those goals. Now, before the last reauthorization, which occurred in 2019, a small group in the Senate shut down most of the bank's lending and operations for nearly 4 years. But Congress eventually sat down and reauthorized the bank. I fought for and secured an increase in the bank's small business lending mandate from 20% to 25% in 2015 and on up to 30% in 2019. Congress also provided the bank with new authority to confront the economic threat posed by China's providing enormous financing for its exports, and I supported those changes. The stakes now are even greater, in large part because of President Trump's chaotic economic policies. The president promised he would create, quote, millions and millions of new manufacturing jobs. In reality, we've lost nearly 90,000 manufacturing jobs since Trump imposed his illegal tariffs. He has slashed clean energy projects, which has driven energy prices higher and cost us thousands of jobs, while it has also taken billions of dollars out of the U.S. economy. The biggest beneficiary of Trump's chaos has been China. The EXIM Bank cannot solve every economic challenge. I understand that. But we have a responsibility to make sure that it is used effectively to advance our economic and national security. So I just want to give a couple of examples, and I want to follow on to Chair Scott's comments that I strongly agree with. First, we should update the China and Transformational Export Program that requires EXIM to help U.S. exporters who are facing competition from China in sectors like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and renewable energy. Congress should also evaluate whether EXIM can do more to promote onshoring of other industries like pharmaceutical manufacturing or critical minerals that are crucial to our security. Second, we should ensure that EXIM's decisions help promote small businesses, innovation, job creation, and robust competition. That means strengthening programs like Make More in America. EXIM should not simply be providing support to the biggest and the most entrenched industry players, or even worse, making it easier for them to squeeze out the small and the mid-sized American businesses, or helping to offshore critical manufacturing jobs. Look, of course, there is more that we can do in a bipartisan way to reform EXIM as part of this reauthorization. But I don't want to ignore the elephant in the room here. The deep corruption that runs through this administration makes it difficult to give the president and his appointees authority over huge sums of money without some guardrails in place. We've already seen companies connected to the president's family or to the families and friends of other administration officials get hundreds of millions of dollars in federal contracts or loans or the opportunity to take part in federal government deals. Foreign countries have thrown billions of dollars at the president, his family, and their friends to try to buy influence. This cloud could hang over XM too, especially because the bank lacks necessary safeguards against corruption. President Trump fired XM's inspector general as part of a larger purge aimed at eliminating transparency and oversight. And he has failed to nominate any Democratic board members to XM, leaving an XM board that is only 2 Republican appointees in charge of what is supposed to be an independent agency with a bipartisan board. So as we work on reauthorization, we must promote strong ethical standards and prevent the bank from being another corrupt tool of this president. I hope we can do that together, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. It's a great honor to appear here as the President and Chairman of the Export-Import Bank of the United States. I'm grateful to Congress for equipping XM with the tools necessary to execute our mission to support American jobs. And I look forward to working with this committee to reauthorize the bank so it can continue operating at the scale today's economic competition demands. Why is XM important to everyday Americans? The bank is one of America's frontline economic tools, carrying out President Trump's vision for reindustrializing America, securing our supply chains, and ensuring our economy works for American workers and American companies, large and small alike. Today, our companies compete in markets where competitors deploy massive state financing, subsidies, industrial policy, all meant to capture these strategic industries. This has led to weakened economic security for the United States and job losses across our country due to deindustrialization. The United States cannot afford to sit on the sidelines. That is why my team and I have set out to use the authority you have provided to revitalize XM, to deliver results for exporters and manufacturers operating across America and helping them once again win all around the world. A key part of that effort is expanding export finance access to small and medium-sized businesses by working with community lenders across the country so mainstream businesses can have access to capital, so they can reach global markets, and so they can grow jobs and create wealth in their communities. We focus the bank around 4 key priorities: expanding market access for American exporters, ensuring American energy molecules and technologies can reach every corner of the globe, strengthening our supply chain security, and ensuring the United States leads the industries that will define the future and support well-paying jobs. Simply put, XM is putting American workers, technology, and manufacturing first. The first project I approved as chairman was a direct loan to a company called 6K Additive in Western Pennsylvania under our Make More in America program, created by the last administration, by the way. This transaction was significant because XM's financing crucially expanded domestic production and processing of critical minerals used in aerospace and defense manufacturing. It also represented the first XM transaction coordinated with the Defense Production Act Title III program. XM is also supporting the export of American energy technologies, from LNG projects along the U.S. Gulf Coast to advanced nuclear power and fuel processing. These projects help foster lasting economic partnerships with key allies based on energy security while supporting jobs and investment here at home. A more recent initiative is Project Vault. On XM's 92nd anniversary earlier this year, I had the honor of joining President Trump in the Oval Office to announce this nearly $12 billion project to establish a critical minerals reserve. Project Vault is designed with one clear goal in mind: ensuring American manufacturers and exporters in your states can absorb supply chain shocks and shortages of critical raw materials needed to manufacture all that powers our economy and everyday lives. It is a uniquely American solution that brings together private capital alongside government financing to ensure supply chains driven entirely by market demand and the need of manufacturers large and small, and without taxpayer subsidy. In fact, as both of you kindly said, everything we do is in service of U.S. taxpayers. Since the current government accounting rules were introduced, XM has returned $10 billion to U.S. Treasury to help pay down debt, all while maintaining a default rate lower than the average private sector lender. And we're just getting started. For the first time in 10 years, I'm proud to say, XM is projected to fully repay its appropriation and return a profit. Even further, XM is on track to authorize more transactions and support more U.S. jobs than any year in its 92-year history. Our current pipeline includes $71 billion in active transactions, spanning critical minerals, civil nuclear energy, and advanced manufacturing. These projects alone are expected to support 45,000 jobs. As I conclude, to sustain this momentum, I'm asking Congress to support 3 provisions in this year's reauthorization. First, reauthorize the bank. Send that clear bipartisan signal to the market. And please reauthorize our mission-critical China and Transformational Exports program. Second, address the constraints under our current default cap, recognizing that risk mitigants already required under current federal credit statute are sensible and work. And 3, provide the hiring flexibility necessary to recruit the specialized expertise required to execute increasingly complex transactions that support American industry and national security. I look forward to getting into more detail on all 3. Reauthorizing and strengthening XM will ensure the next generation of global industry is built with American workers, American technology, and American leadership. Thank you, and I very much look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, when you and I discussed working closer with the committee, I did not mean for you to take my employees like Kevin. So my first question, my first question will be for Kevin, as opposed to you. Just joking, actually. Chairman, you just really did a good job of distilling some of the really important components to what will make the XM Bank successful and make America even more successful into the future. And that really is about restoring American jobs, reorienting our supply chains here at home, and frankly, standing strong and tall against China. Help us understand, frankly, putting more skin on the bones, how that's happening now at the XM Bank under your leadership, and what critical pieces of the XM Bank today are missing from a staffing perspective. I think that's a really important part of the process.
Chairman Scott, thank you for your continued leadership and for all your support. In our first meeting when I sat in your chambers with you, you brought up the CTEP program, and you asked me what my vision was. And actually, I sat in this chair about a year ago and answered many CTEP questions, and I made you a promise that under my leadership, CTEP would no longer be an appendage, something that was an afterthought, something that was outside of our core operations. And the first thing I did was bring it in and it's become the nucleus of everything we do. So CTEP has now been fully integrated in all of our global origination and business development efforts. In fact, the individual who ran CTEP now leads all of our global origination efforts. So every single significant transaction is now under her leadership, and the results speak for themselves. Really, 1 out of every 4 transactions is a CTEP-oriented transaction. Candidly, it's hard for me to think about a single deal we're looking at of size that doesn't touch CTEP, that doesn't have CTEP as the intel inside to it, if you will. But what we really need to be successful across those 10 transformational areas, we need subject matter experts. And it is really challenging to hire people that we need who understand these very complex industries under the current hiring framework. And so it's no coincidence that one of the only 3 things that we're asking for today is the ability to bring on folks in this capacity. And so oftentimes they're not political hires, and they're not individuals who are ready to pursue a career in government service, but they know their stuff.
Let me ask you a question on that topic, because I think you just hit the nail on the head. We talked earlier about the importance of returning more back to the Treasury, which really creates better insulation and protection for the taxpayer. $10 billion is a story that should be told over and over and over again. Thinking about the importance of subject matter experts and the low default ratios that you have, it seems to me if you're going to expand your portfolio, get into areas that we haven't been in before to keep America more resilient, that the subject matter experts will help us to maybe expand the portfolio, take greater risk, and maintain a lower ratio.
It's that and then some. some of these areas are quite complex. For instance, I sat and gave Senator Kim an assurance that we would pursue biotechnology efforts. And, Ranking Member Warren mentioned in her opening statement the pharmaceutical needs that we have to reshore here in America. These are things you can't fake, Chairman Scott. You either know it or you don't. And so on the one hand, you're absolutely right. It'll allow us to make better risk-adjusted decisions and be more prudent with the capital that we have, but also be able to allow us to tackle evenly all 10 areas that are outlined in CTEP.
Second question, for the public who they have no reason to understand the Exim Bank at all, frankly. I'm not sure all members of Congress understand the Exim Bank. I would ask you to really delineate why it's important for us to have a public apparatus that is engaged and involved, and why some of the smaller financial institutions can't actually do what you do, and how working hand in glove with these financial partners is actually good for the private sector.
Yeah. I'll give you a real life example. I'll bring it to life for you. The best day in an entrepreneur's life, if you run a small, medium-sized business in America, could be the worst day of your career. What I mean by that is if you get a large sales order that really increases your business, but the crisis is you don't know how to finance it, especially if it's export-oriented, it's a real problem. And Ranking Member Warren, when you and I sat in your office together, we talked about the fact that we can't allow small, medium-sized companies in America to simply rely on the largest banks that we have. And that's because they really don't understand what it takes to help unlock the working capital solutions they need. And we need them because we can't talk about supply chain security without talking about small, medium-sized businesses. It's what they are.
Senator Warren.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, President Yovanovitch, Exim is currently authorized to make up to $135 billion in loans, guarantees, and insurance. It's a lot of money, and we may even raise that cap higher. So let me start with what I hope will be a softball. Exim is required to evaluate specific statutory criteria like job creation and reasonable assurance of repayment in deciding whether or not to extend loans or other financial support to companies. Do you commit that Exim will not extend loans based on whether a business is connected to President Trump or his family or his friends or some other member of the administration?
It's an easy one. Regardless of who you are, Senator Warren, if you come to the Export-Import Bank of the United States looking for a loan, you face the same rules, the same process, the same criteria.
I like it when I throw a softball and you hit it out of the park. Look, there is so much corruption right now across this administration. It is important to ensure that Exim doesn't become another piggy bank for friends of the president or other administration officials. And that is especially true when the president fires Exim's inspector general and when he refuses to appoint Democratic members to the bipartisan board of Exim. So let me ask you about critical minerals. There's a broad bipartisan consensus that we need to quickly reduce our dependence on China. Earlier this year, President Trump launched Project Vault, a public-private partnership to stockpile critical minerals for U.S. manufacturers. Now, it's backed by a $10 billion loan from Exim. I see the value of an initiative like this, but the American people are going to need a lot more transparency to be reassured that their taxpayer dollars are being used to achieve strategic goals and not just to hand out favors to the Trump family or friends. So, President Yovanovitch, do you commit to sharing with Congress all of the term sheets, the contracts, and the loan agreements with Project Vault?
Senator Warren, you know me to be a systematic thinker, someone
do.
who takes this obligation very seriously. We designed Project Vault to actually do exactly what you've described, to actually promote transparency, to be entirely demand-driven by the market, so a decentralized decision-making mechanism. We held over 30 congressional briefings on this, over a dozen by myself.
I hear you, but answer my question.
We're going to give you all the information you need within the process to better understand what's happening, what's going on.
Congress can see the term sheets, the contracts, and the loan agreements associated with the project.
We're going to continue to work with you to make sure you get all the information you need within the process. It's better than
but I'm going to
this.
decide I'm going to decide what I need here, okay? Good. Despite the promise of Project Vault, reports indicate that it's open to largely blue chip original equipment manufacturers, and that leaves out a lot of the small businesses that we've been talking about that make up the vast majority of U.S. manufacturers. So let me ask, is it true that only large blue chip manufacturers are included in Project Vault?
Couldn't be further from the truth, actually. And so there are two things I think really worth noting on this. Number one is that the participation of blue chip companies actually creates the credit profile in the entire Project Vault that will actually allow small and medium-sized companies to participate. That's number one. But number two, even the largest blue chip companies, when we talk about their supply chain that they're actually trying to fortify, that they want to ensure that they can think about the just-in-case scenarios, not the just-in-time scenarios, they're made up of all those small companies as well. So it couldn't be further from the truth.
So, but this underscores the point I've been trying to make about transparency. Public reporting suggests that this is a project focused squarely on large established manufacturers. That's what's available in the public reports. As you know, 99% of U.S. manufacturers are small or medium sized. We just want to be confident they're not being cut out. And I'm perfectly willing to believe you, but transparency is what will make that clear. So I just want to do one more on Project Vault, and that is I urge you to quickly expand Project Vault to small and medium-sized businesses. Make sure they're getting a chance to participate here. Will you ensure that it is governed by binding ethics and anti-corruption standards so that Project Vault is not used to benefit friends and family of President Trump or other senior administration officials?
It'll adhere with all the highest ethical standards and the best industry practices across the board.
I appreciate that. I support XM, and I want to see it out there for our manufacturers. I just want to make sure that the public can maintain confidence in it. Thank you.
So do I.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for being back here again. The last time, Mr. Jovanovic, that you were back here, you appeared before this committee as the nominee to be the president and chairman of the XM Bank. I asked you about countering China's state-backed subsidies and export credit agencies that support their exporters, often at the expense of American manufacturers, and what XM can do to level the playing field. You responded by saying that doing so will be a focal point of your tenure at XM. Under your leadership, what initiatives has XM launched to counter CCP subsidies, and what can we expect in the next few years from XM in this regard, and what may XM need from Congress to support those efforts as we consider reauthorizing XM this year?
Thank you, Senator Rounds. So first off, as I said a moment ago, I brought CTEP, the program that you helped forge and launch, into the center of everything we do. And so now 1 out of every 4 transactions directly derives from the CTEP program, but nearly every single large one touches it. So that's number one. Number two, we've really focused in on crafting our 4 strategic priorities that are meant to revitalize the bank, that are meant to reawaken all this great 92-year muscle memory we have, to strengthen our supply chains, to ensure that we're energy secure and dominant, to ensure our exporters can win everywhere around the world, and to make sure we can define the industries of the future. All 4 of those are meant to win. And finally, I think it's worth noting that the best thing that we could do is what we're here to talk about today, is to send a strong bipartisan signal that the Export-Import Bank of the United States is here to stay, and that CTEP is a critical tool along with it.
Thank you for that answer. Let's turn a little bit to AI and how we impact our capabilities here in the United States with it. You know, exporting the full AI stack, from the hardware layer like semiconductors or memory to the software applications like AI models to enable American AI dominance, it has been a priority of this administration. Can you walk us through the work that's being done with the White House on the American AI export program and your plans for increasing American AI exports across the AI stack?
Absolutely. So first off, the Export-Import Bank is very proud to be a part of the President's Global AI Export Plan. It's led by, I believe, the most brilliant practitioner on artificial intelligence of my generation. He just happens to be a good friend and college classmate of mine, Michael Kratsios. We are really thinking about how this is a unique challenge that touches all of the aspects that you described. So first off, artificial intelligence means taking energy and creating electrons that then power bits. And so it all starts with energy security. But fundamentally, we're thinking about how can we bundle together a US-led artificial intelligence solution that is accessible to countries, rich and poor, large and small. Because everyone who comes and talks to us in our rounds, one of the first questions they ask, say, how can I partner with the United States on artificial intelligence? Because they understand that getting AI right will define the 21st century and beyond.
Thank you. I'm just curious, how large is your board?
Our board is 5 people by statute. Today, it's comprised of 3 individuals who create a quorum.
So there's 2 board member positions that are not filled at this time.
There are technically 3. There's also a vice chairman role that we have someone in an acting position. But yes, there are 2 full-time board roles that are open.
Working though with the existing quorum present.
That's correct.
Thank you. EXIM supports U.S. exporters by filling financing gaps from private sector, importantly for small and mid-sized businesses that are not well established and may not have access to the capital required to break into the market overseas. Would you please share with the committee how EXIM currently supports U.S.-based small and mid-sized businesses, particularly those in rural areas such as my home state of South Dakota, and the current steps being taken at EXIM to make sure that U.S. small businesses are able to compete with state-sponsored entities from China and foreign markets?
Absolutely. So first off, it is a key criterion to everything we do that we are adding something to the capital formation, not detracting or replacing or crowding out private sector capital. That's very important. On the small, medium-sized businesses, it's actually nearly 90% of what the bank does all day, every day, which makes sense because 95% of companies in America are small and medium-sized businesses. 75% of all payrolls are provided and paid by small and medium-sized businesses. And as Senator Warren mentioned, 99% of manufacturers are SMEs.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Chair Yovanovitch, thanks for coming on out here. I wanted to talk about civilian nuclear energy. U.S. exporters often face competitors backed by aggressive state-directed financing from countries like China and Russia. To what extent is XM currently losing deals on speed and certainty alone? And would a tailored exception for nuclear from the default rate cap help close that gap?
I think having more tools, more clarity, more modernization, particularly tailored to nuclear, would always be helpful, Senator Kim. But I think it's worth noting a couple of things.
Yeah.
I want to be accountable to the question you asked me when I was here a year ago. Nuclear power is very important to what we're doing on the energy security side as one of our 4 priorities. Because, as you know, this is what builds the decades-long energy security and economic relationship. So that's number 1. Number 2, I don't think our nuclear power loan pipeline has ever been higher. We are very actively looking for opportunities to ensure that U.S. technologies and fuel supply chains are what power the nuclear future. And lastly, I think it's really worth noting that we'll go a step further. It's really hard to win the nuclear energy future without focusing on the uranium enrichment supply chain. And so we've even taken great steps to support startups that are looking to reshore some of that because we're over-reliant and over-concentrated with having some of our strategic adversaries provide those services, but also looking for existing facilities where the U.S. economy can have a greater role.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, one thing I was thinking about is just how much the early financing commitments are important in this front. It can effectively determine, who wins the deal. So I guess I wanted to ask you, does XM currently have the tools and flexibility to engage early enough to shape those outcomes in the different projects you were just talking about?
Yes, but yes, we do, in that we have loans that are very much tailored to the early process, and that's meant to be a gateway to accessing our longer term financing. But what really helps, given the long tenor of all of these, the long timeline, long horizon of all of these, is to send that strong signal that we're here to stay with a reauthorization, and also to give us the sensible flexibility on the risk management side that served us well for 81 plus years to go back to that. That's what's really going to make a difference with nuclear transactions.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We need the early financing, but we also need to maintain that steady pipeline going forward because these are longer term projects, and we need to have that assurance. Is that right?
Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, and so I'd like to switch gears. Quantum is something that I've had a number of times opportunity to sit down and talk to different industry leaders on this, and it's just so important for our competitiveness on this front. So I guess I just wanted to ask you, what role do you think XM should be playing when it comes to ensuring American competitiveness and being a leader when it comes to quantum?
It's a great question. We're thinking about all it takes to power quantum computing capabilities. So our energy security side is very important. But coming back to what Senator Rounds had asked about the Global AI Export Program, it's also important that we help support nascent technologies that are looking to perhaps create a more modular, a faster to market solution to ensure that we could scale. And this is something we can't afford to get wrong.
I agree with you on this front. I just ask that you take a closer look into quantum specifically. I mean, I guess, I get it, AI and other aspects are incredibly important. But when we ask this question to your team, about how many deals has XM done on quantum, the answer back to us was one ever. And I'm not putting that on you. It's ever.
No.
And I point that out as I just think that I don't want that to be a blind spot for us. And so if we can just make sure we're following through on this and thinking about what is the appropriate level in which XM can do, because I just think we can be doing more than one deal ever. And I think that this is a place to grow.
Can I ask for something in return to
Sure.
help make this happen? It's really important that we're able to have the hiring authority that we've asked for in our three requests, because again, it's really hard to fake understanding quantum computing.
Yeah,
And so
no, I
we
agree,
just
and
need
I think having the expertise there. I was also hearing that maybe we could have stronger expertise on nuclear as well, across the board. And just with the last couple seconds here, biotech, you talked about how we talked about that in your confirmation hearing. Where does that stand, and what can we do to make sure we're maintaining our competitive edge, given what we're seeing with China's push on this?
We're doing our best to make sure that we're understanding where our vulnerabilities lie as to why we can't have more research persist here and more innovation persist here. Again, it'd really help if I had team members who weren't learning it on the fly or trying to better understand it as they go. So having the subject matter experts really helps. And we're tying it back to how we reshore a lot of the key pharmaceutical supply chains will also be a help.
Yeah, Chairman, let's make sure we're following up and making sure they're getting the experts there that can do this technical work. It's so important. Thank you.
I do think it would be important for my friends, Democrat friends, to send some nominees to the White House. That we were talking earlier about the importance of having a bipartisan board. You got to have some nominees for that to happen. So I would encourage my friends on the left to figure out a few nominees to send over to the White House.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Senator Ricketts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good to see you again, Chairman Jovanovich. The Export-Import Bank plays an important role in supporting American jobs and ensuring exporters can compete globally. In fact, there's a couple of Nebraska companies, Reinke Irrigation and Deschler and Preferred Popcorn and Chapman, that are really helped by the program there, so thank you for that. And for states like Nebraska, that means supporting agricultural producers, equipment manufacturers, such as the ones I just mentioned, industrial exporters who compete in a tough global marketplace. But today, those markets are increasingly shaped not by fair competition, but by state-directed financing from Communist China. Communist China is our country's greatest existential external threat. Communist China has and continues to deploy state-backed export financing at a scale that outpaces the U.S. In 2024 alone, Communist China's official export credit agencies provided over $23 billion in medium and long-term financing compared to roughly $5.9 billion from the U.S. If you were to take the average of China's medium and long-term export financing from 2015 to 2024, it would be $25.31 billion a year. Over that same period, the U.S. averaged $2.91 billion per year. The XM Bank's 2025 competitiveness report to Congress confirmed these results. The report also shares that U.S. exporter and banking communities continue to view XM Bank as not competitive in the medium and long-term financing arena. Chairman Jovanovic, I know you haven't been in the role for very long, but how do you explain the recent low ratings on competitiveness from the export community and our stagnant levels of medium and long-term financing over the years?
First off, I think it's really important to note that for quite a long time, XM has been hobbled by first not having a quorum for 4 years. And I know that sounds like it was a long time ago, but we're just starting to clear the scar tissue from not having a clear authorization and not giving the market a very clear signal that we're here to stay. That's number one. Number two, what I learned in my first 100 days, and a lot of this was actually informed by the very helpful book that you shared with me when we were together in your chamber about Six Sigma, was really about bringing a data-driven approach and promoting accountability and transparency. And so what I found, Senator Ricketts, is people want to win. And I manage a building that's filled with mission-driven people, whether you're a political appointee or you're a career employee. And so giving them a very clear sense of what a win looks like, giving them very clear set of priorities, and pushing and working together has really made a difference. And so whether it's Project Vault, which is a very key puzzle piece, and we hope a beginning to a whole set of solutions to address supply chain insecurity, de-risk our supply chains, create markets that are free, fair, functioning again, and that's critical. America wins, U.S. companies win, our allies thrive when we have markets that are free, fair, and functioning, and that's what we want to help promote.
Okay, great. Well, outside of needing our help on reauthorization, how are you planning course correction at XM Bank to boost your competitiveness in this area?
It's already begun. And so what we've done is we've actually taken down a lot of silos. You know, it's very difficult to eliminate those errors and reduce that variability across outcomes if you do. We very much need the hiring authority that we're discussing here today. It's mission critical. And finally, what we really need to do is send that very clear signal, because we've studied in preparation for not just this hearing, but for our proposal, how recent reauthorizations have affected the bank's operations. And any confusion or any concern that the bank won't be reauthorized in a timely and smooth manner really sets a chill through the market, and people just put pencils down with us, Senator Ricketts, and we can't afford that. We've got a $71 billion pipeline, 45,000 jobs at stake that we want to help support. So many of those small businesses, we just want to keep doing what we're doing.
Great. Let me, the time remaining, just real briefly on CTEP, the XM Bank Inspector General's 2024 review of CTEP shared that the disproportionate share of XM's activity has been focused on 2 of the 10 buckets, wireless communications and critical minerals. We've talked about the importance of critical minerals, but there's also semiconductors, biotech, quantum. We just talked a little bit from Senator Kim about quantum AI. Can you just quickly give us a status and the update on some of those other areas and how you're going to focus resources on those so that we can make progress there as well?
We're aggressively pursuing all 10. But what we've learned in short order is that you need the subject matter experts to properly pursue those.
So it gets back to the hiring authority to get the right people.
They're complex. You can't fake it. You can't learn it on the fly, and especially when you're putting hard-earned taxpayer dollars at work.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Senator Van Hollen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, welcome. I think you're hearing bipartisan support overall for the XM mission. And I hope we can all keep it that way. And I think part of keeping it that way means sticking to that mission and not embarking on political adventures that don't advance the core mission of XM. And it caught my eye recently when Secretary of Energy Chris Wright said it was a, quote, real possibility that XM could provide, quote, credit support for large projects down there, unquote, meaning Venezuela, and that Secretary Bessent made similar suggestions. Now, by law and under its charter, XM can only approve loans if it received a, quote, reasonable assurance of repayment, unquote, right? That's the standard. And Venezuela and its state-owned company, PDVSA, have been in default on debt since 2017. In 2007, Venezuela nationalized foreign-owned oil projects, and creditors have been pursuing billions of dollars of claims against Venezuela and its oil assets for years. So, simple, straightforward question, Mr. Chairman. You would agree with me that Venezuela can't possibly meet that standard of reasonable assurance of repayment? right?
It's even simpler than that. The bank isn't open for business in Venezuela today, and so it would need to be reopened. So we can't actually lend any money to Venezuela today.
Right. So, but now Secretary Wright, I'm sure you saw his comments. You saw his comments, right?
I've spoken to Secretary Wright, Secretary Besson about this extensively. I think what they're referring to, Senator Van Hollen, is that over 92 years, we've worked and done very similar types of transactions in reconstruction areas all over the world. And so what we've been doing actively is trying to collect best practices and what we've learned about these various situations and feeding that into the decision-making in and around how do we promote accountability and transparency as it pertains to fund flows. And so that's the limit of our activity today as it pertains to Venezuela.
All right. I'm not clear what kind of assistance they're talking about providing, but the purpose of XM is to support American workers, right? And companies?
In everything we do.
All right. It doesn't sound to me like giving advice to the Venezuelan state-owned oil companies would advance that mission. And so I really hope that XM doesn't embark down that path. Okay?
Forgive me, I wasn't clear. When I say best practices and advice, I mean to U.S. policymakers, decision makers, as they look to find opportunities for American companies, as they look to find opportunities for energy and supply chain security cooperation, and to ensure that we have a Western Hemisphere that's prosperous, stable, and secure, that benefits all Americans. That, I think, is worth our time.
Yeah. Well, I'm again, it just caught my attention, Secretary Wright's remarks, so we're going to be watching this carefully and look forward to following up with you. Senator Kim raised the idea of XM support for civilian peaceful nuclear power. I share his views regarding that. You would agree, though, that we should do that in a manner that doesn't risk violating or undermining our nuclear nonproliferation goals, right?
We should pursue it in a way that applies by all laws and achieves all of our strategic objectives at home and abroad.
Right. So XM was approached. I don't think it ever consummated a deal, but I think it was prepared to go forward with a deal years ago with the UAE. The UAE agreed to what we call the gold standard additional protocol, 1, 2, 3 agreements to make sure that we prevent nuclear proliferation. And I support that standard. There are lots of reports, as you know, that the Trump administration is now pursuing a nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia. For years, I had a provision included in the appropriations bills that essentially said we should not allow XM Bank to provide financing unless Saudi Arabia agrees to the gold standard. This year, Republicans insisted on taking that out, which created a concern for me as to what the objectives are. Would you agree that XM should not engage in an agreement, nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia doesn't agree to the toughest 1, 2, 3 gold standards to prevent nuclear nonproliferation?
It sounds as though it's a complex back and forth. I'd love to better understand it. What I can assure you is that XM will always provide financings to projects that adhere to the highest industry standards and ensure they follow all American laws and that they achieve our strategic objectives at home and abroad.
So let me just really ask you in closing, would that decision be something that XM Bank, in other words, the assessment on the proliferation risk, would that be something XM undertook, or would you essentially take direction from others in the administration regarding their assessment?
One of the great things about my job, Senator, I don't make any policy.
Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this important hearing and frankly for caring so much about the Export-Import Bank. I came here 8 years ago wondering how did I end up on this committee, except that I could at least advocate for export-import. And now we have a chairman that does as well. So thank you for that. Literally, it has been my 8 years here, the Export-Import Bank's been as high a priority on this committee for me as any, which is why I was quite honored 7 years ago to be able to carry the ball for the, at that time, record reauthorization of 7 years. Had to do it through circuitous means, but this is way more encouraging. But now, of course, I have the bill along with Senator Warner to extend it to 10 years, which I think that certainty helps the certainty of the bank and the ability of the bank to lend to companies who need long-term certainty. And so I'm looking forward to that, and I'm very encouraged by the encouragement and by the enthusiasm on both sides of the aisle on that. Really, other than, I think I hear you saying that authorization to hire talent is important. I've got that message. You've touched on the default rate a couple of times, and as of others, but I'd be interested in ideas, whether it's a menu of ideas or your favorite idea of what the default rate, what we could do to free that up a little bit, or free you up a little bit to do some of the bigger tasks, take on some of the greater risks, while protecting the funds.
So, Senator Kramer, thank you for your continued thought leadership. Thank you for championing EXIM, clearly in times when it was a lot less popular to do so. I think the best thing that we could do on the risk management provisions is go back to the system that worked so well for 81 plus years, that's reasonable, that's accountable. Notice we're not asking to move the goalposts. We're not asking to be judged by different metrics. We're simply saying that over the course of the past few years, we've had provisions put on the bank that weren't meant to set it up for success. They were meant to suffocate it. And so what we're asking for is bring us back to the system that worked so well for 81 plus years and allow us to pursue the transactions that we're all describing that we want to pursue. And that's really what we need, and that's what we're asking for today.
So, we like rather clearly defined things. We'll screw it up for you. Don't worry about that. But we like fairly defined, I think, measurements. So the 2% that's not necessarily the problem, or is that a problem? Because you testified that in private lenders it's higher than or that your default rate's much lower than private lenders. Is that accurate?
Significantly lower. And you know, I'm not asking to move the goalpost.
Yeah.
You can keep the 2%. All I'm saying is that allow us the very reasonable opportunity to manage through it, and manage through it together with actually more oversight and more partnership. It's really the threat of the looming pencils down provision that's chilling. I think we may be the only 92-year-old institution that has the threat of infant mortality every few years.
Yeah.
Right? So we just want the opportunity to operate, and more importantly, I think you said it best in your opening remarks, to send that very clear signal that we're here to stay, especially on these longer dated strategic transactions.
It's interesting. We talked a lot about the China provision, and we were all, we all recall that. We hear some of the success of it, but I was sort of struck, I think, when Senator Warren was talking, that if we're really doing our job, China doesn't matter. It doesn't. I mean, every exporter and importer is competing against China. But I think it's great to have a focus, or even if it's just a rhetorical focus. So with that, I appreciate your service. I appreciate your being here. I appreciate your directness. But I also have to say, the irony is not lost on me that we're all in a bipartisan way championing export-import at the same time as our colleagues on the other side of the dais are trying to defund our customs offices. It's kind of unbelievable to me that we encourage you to help us do more exporting and importing, while they want to shut down the very mechanism that allows that practice to take place. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Chair Scott. Despite American manufacturers struggling under the weight of President Trump's tariff tax regime, the Export-Import Bank continues to help support American manufacturing by providing financing for American exports and helping American businesses find and secure new markets all around the world. One of the EXIM Bank's mandates is to facilitate and finance U.S. exports to sub-Saharan Africa, where you're open for business, I think, in 39 of 49 countries, to strengthen U.S.-Africa economic ties. Chair Yovanovitch, welcome. How is the Export-Import Bank fulfilling its congressional mandate to support American exports to sub-Saharan Africa?
Thank you, Senator Warnock. It's very critical to our mission, but it's also very important to me. I've just stood up a bipartisan advisory committee focused on sub-Saharan Africa. I think it's the best, largely because I've gotten strong commitments from each of them that we're going to put them to work, roll up their sleeves and help us navigate. To your point, there are 49 countries, give or take, in sub-Saharan Africa. We're open for business in 39 of them. And we think there's a really unique window of opportunity. And of all the heads of state that I've gotten to speak to over the past year, actually the most have been from Africa. And it's consistent what they tell me. Help us work with you on supply chain security, help us with energy security using U.S. molecules and technologies. Let's work together. Let's focus on building those lasting economic ties and in some cases fortifying them. So it's a big part of what we do.
I think there's a great deal of promise and possibility with us growing our export-import relationship with Africa. And I appreciate all that XM is doing to fulfill its mandate. I believe that we can do a whole lot more to strengthen our economic ties. It's long past time for Congress to provide a long-term reauthorization of AGOA, the African Growth Opportunity Act. I know this is also a priority of Chair Scott. What benefits do you see in a longer-term AGOA reauthorization, something that I'm very focused on, and how would additional certainty for businesses support American exports to Africa?
I'm very familiar with AGOA. In fact, although I don't make policy, I also very rarely advocate for it, but this is an exception, Senator Warnock. So one of my first meetings I held was with a head of state from the continent, and they asked very clearly, please help us reauthorize AGOA. This was before the calendar year end. And I'm not shy about saying that I was very vocal about its importance to exactly those relationships, the supply chain security, the energy security bit. And we're able to do it. But I think it's important to note, Senator Warnock, it's not just reauthorizing it, it's ensuring that we have no carve-outs or limitations to it. So in its current form, it's quite effective. We need to use that opportunity to continue to push it.
And the reauthorization is important to create the kind of certainty that businesses need in order to know that this is a good time and a place to invest, correct?
I know the feeling. I'm here asking for the same thing for XM, so yes.
Absolutely. Well, I support you in that regard, absolutely. The XM Bank has established the China and Transformational Exports Program, or CTEP, with bipartisan support from Congress. Very interested in your comments regarding the bipartisan, I think, advisory council that you mentioned that you set up. And I appreciate the spirit with which you are approaching that work. And while XM has historically been supported by members of both parties and presidents from both parties, it remains one of the agencies without any appointed Democrats. So you have made it a point to put together a bipartisan advisory council for your work. XM doesn't have any appointed Democrats. When you met with me and my staff, you agreed that this was important to have Democratic commissioners and bipartisan support and leadership. Am I correct to assume that you still do believe that?
I absolutely stand by it. I would benefit from a full board, just like any president and chairman would.
That's good to hear, but there's still no Democrats appointed to your agency. Have you had any recent conversations with the White House over possible appointments?
Yes, I have them regularly.
Well, I would encourage you to make a stronger effort without the White House actually nominating Democrats and honoring the historic bipartisan nature of many of these boards. They undermine your work. And the reauthorization process, which I support, becomes difficult. Will you encourage the White House to nominate Democrats to serve on XM Bank? And I'm sure that Chair Scott and Ranking Member Warren would help facilitate a swift confirmation if they're qualified.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Jovanovich, Indiana manufacturers and exporters depend on a level playing field when they sell to the rest of the world. China's state-controlled companies do not operate by the same rules. The Belt and Road Initiative is not just an infrastructure program, it's a geopolitical strategy backed by the full weight of the Chinese government. And it has cost American businesses and jobs, especially in places like my great state in Indiana. That's why, Mr. Chairman, I support the important work that XM does to counter China and help American manufacturers compete on a level playing field. And it's why I hope this committee will quickly consider legislation to reauthorize XM Bank. And I'll tell you, I didn't always feel that way. I didn't always consider the importance of the XM Bank, but now more than ever, with our competition with China, I think the time has come that we need to reauthorize it and do it as fast as we can. I know that you're focused on using XM to help American companies compete against PRC financing. Has XM done a systemic review of countries where Chinese government financing has pushed out American firms?
As part of our global origination and business development efforts, what we do is look to find ways where economic security for the United States can be adequately represented. And so coincidentally, we spent a lot of time looking at opportunities in Africa where working in these markets could help bring about further supply chain security for the United States. We absolutely look for what it takes for American companies to be competitive and win all around the world. And it's not just the biggest. It's also the small, medium-sized businesses that need our help the most. In fact, of the nearly 100 exporters that we've supported over the past few years in your great state of Indiana, 7 out of every 10 of them have been small and medium-sized businesses. And when we talk about supply chain center banks, that's what we're talking about. A bunch of companies coming together to make America competitive and ensure we win.
I appreciate that very much. What sectors or regions are you targeting to win back for American manufacturers?
What's been great about the CTEP program is actually the specificity about the 10 strategic areas of focus. And so, as you can imagine, given how dire the need is to de-risk our supply chains and ensure that we're relying on markets that are free, fair, and functioning again, we've spent a lot of time on critical minerals and critical raw materials. Now, that being said, as I've said countless times today, we really need the ability to hire the subject matter experts to adequately pursue and evenly pursue all 10 areas.
And you need us to reauthorize to do that?
We need to be not just reauthorized, we need CTEP. At this point, CTEP is synonymous with XM. And so we need CTEP reauthorized alongside XM's reauthorization, but also we need the opportunity to be able to hire those subject matter experts and help us go back to operating sensibly. We do so transparently, we do so accountably. We've shied above a 1% default rate for years. Well below. We're taking and making a greater impact than ever. We have a larger pipeline than ever. Let's go back to the sensible approach that is still more conservative than any private lender of our size or scope.
Very good. As you know, Indiana is the top manufacturing state per capita in the entire country. We make steel. We're the top steel producer in the country. We make cars, medical devices, pharmaceuticals, Eli Lilly. For decades, China has undercut our manufacturers by flooding the world with state-subsidized goods at prices that American companies cannot match without a government check behind them. How does XM factor in Chinese dumping and price manipulation when it decides whether to finance an export deal with an American company?
What it comes down to is how can our participation in a transaction help promote markets that are free, fair, and functioning again? Because that's really what we're talking about. I've yet to meet an American company that asks us to rig it in their favor, right? All they say is give us the opportunity to compete, level that playing field. 92 years ago, believe it or not, that's exactly what President Roosevelt set out to do when he created XM, just level the playing field for American companies. And if we have that opportunity, I can assure you that more companies, not just in Indiana, but in every single one of your states will win.
Appreciate your leadership. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, sir. Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Warren. Thank you also, Mr. Jovanovic, for being here. The XM Bank, or the Export-Import Bank, has made a real difference in the state of Delaware. Since 2014, it has supported more than $2 billion in export value from my state, including $200 million by small businesses. I also had the opportunity to host the EXIM Bank in our state in 2023, and was a partnership with the World Trade Center Delaware to connect our local companies with the EXIM Bank. I think a lot of times there were many businesses that just didn't even know what tools were offered, what resources that the EXIM Bank provided. So we got a chance to do that. And as we look at reauthorization, I want to just focus on a few priorities that I have that are, I think, very much in sync with your priorities. In your testimony, you stated, you talked about small businesses being a priority, and it's truly a priority for me. Over the past decade, XM has supported about 4,000 small businesses nationwide. Would you say, is that a correct number? Because before I go any further, I just want to.
It sounds directionally correct.
Okay. But there are nearly 300,000 exporters in this country, and most of them are small businesses. And as we see the dynamic in Delaware, we've got about 1,900 small business exporters, but only 9 of them have really availed themselves of the tools of EXIM Bank. And so I know in your testimony you referenced it, and I was hoping that today you could talk a little bit about both your vision and your plan for expanding small business participation with the EXIM Bank.
It is a perfect opportunity to do so, so thank you. We find the best way to do so is actually to empower relationships with community lenders, because they know these businesses way better than we ever will. They're in their communities, they're regionally covering them, they know what they need. Now, actually, one of the best conversations I had on this was with Ranking Member Warren. We sat in your chambers together, and we said that, and we agreed that only having a relationship with only 34 community lenders in our program was terrible. I think I used the word terrible. It wasn't even one per state. Wow. And so what we're doing, and can I be honest, when I dug a little deeper, it turns out it was even worse than that. We only have 2 active relationships with those community lenders. So of the 34 that were eligible, only 2 were actively using the product.
Wow.
And what I said was that's unacceptable. So what we're working on is actually, we're not being a lone ranger in this. We're actually working with other government agencies with whom we can harmonize some of our work. So the SBA is a great partner in this. We're not just comparing notes. We're looking for ways we can harmonize our product and our outreach. So now all of a sudden, every single location they have, any interaction they have, they also get to mention is what we would call in the private sector, cross-sell XM's capabilities. So we're charting out a program where we don't just want one in every one of our 50 states. We want 3 relationships over the next 3 years before the end of my term, and we want to get to $1 billion to supporting small businesses. Because guess what? It's not just that $1 billion, it's the multiplier effect it has in every single one of these communities in wealth creation, job creation. That's, I think, the way to tackle the very critical problem that you've outlined today.
I would love to follow up with this, and I think the whole committee would really be interested in this, because to us, small businesses are the backbone of this country, and to be able to strengthen them means we strengthen our communities and our states. And so would love to follow up with you on your action plan and how we can work together, especially during the reauthorization. Turning to supply chains, I've been fortunate to lead bipartisan legislation with Senators Cantwell and Blackburn called the Promoting Resilient Supply Chains Act here in the Senate, and I also got an opportunity to lead on supply chains in the House in a bipartisan way. We know that that's going to promote our economic security, our national security, our health, and I appreciate you also referencing supply chain security as a priority. One of the big things that we found was that as a country, we are not looking at what might become a supply chain shock, or how do we predict, how do we forecast? And so I'm curious how you spoke a lot about critical minerals, but we know medical supplies, energy, manufacturing, it's all connected to that. So would love to follow up with you on what you're doing to predict supply chain shocks and how that coordinates with what your agency is doing on supply chains.
Can I answer?
Yeah, very quickly.
Very quickly. The best way to predict it is to actually let the market tell you what they need, because these companies know their supply chains better than you do. And so they're geared towards this just-in-time inventory model. If we give them an opportunity like Project Vault, they can start to think about the just-in-case scenarios.
Senator Moreno.
We'll follow up with you on supply chains and ports.
Senator Moreno.
I don't mind giving my colleague from Delaware anytime.
Senator from Rochester, you're back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know you're going to be horrified by what I'm about to say.
Uh-oh.
So let me start by something I think is important to acknowledge, which is the great work that you've done in this committee. It is actually remarkable what we've been able to accomplish together. And I don't mean this just, by the way, on the Republican side. I think on the Democrat side as well. Like my colleague, Lisa, we've worked together. We got the pattern books that I went all over Ohio. They're very excited about that. With the ranking member, I'm very happy about the way that the Institutional Investor Ban came out. I think it's absolutely correct that we should be building homes to buy and not to rent. And I urge my colleagues in the House to vote for the bill as is without modifying it and get that bill passed. We don't do a lot of things in this chamber that's 89-10. And I think the House should take that bill up, should pass it as is, and should get it on the president's desk.
Will the senator yield?
Yes, of course.
Please reset his clock to 5 minutes. Thank you.
No. Well, I wasn't done yet, Mr. Chairman. We also, by the way, got the FIRM Act done. We got hearings on debankings. We got nominations done at a record pace. We got the Genius Act done. This is the first hearing that I know of in the last 5 or 6 years on the XM Bank, which is obviously so critical. So I think again, just sometimes you don't like to take victory laps, and I think you deserve a huge amount of credit for what you've done here in the banking committee. I really, really thank you. And I thank my Democrat colleagues for making this a very cohesive committee here at a time of non-cohesiveness. So I just with that, I do want to acknowledge, and I'm just going to be tongue-in-cheek here, that I'm glad to see the love being shown to you because you didn't get any Democrat support when your confirmation vote came, but they love you now, which is what matters, John. But you know, you're an incredibly intelligent man. You're doing some great work in the XM Bank. I want to just touch on a couple things. This concept of hiring authority. I just want to make sure for all of us that you really drill down on that. And I just want to make sure your commitment is to hiring the absolute best people for the job, period. No other qualifiers. Best qualified person for that job. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times a team member will come into my office and say, I've got some good news and I got some bad news. Good news is we found a terrific individual. They're mid-career. They have great experience. They understand one of the 10 transformational sectors in CTEP, and they're mission-driven. They want to spend a year or two working in the federal government, wanting to advance supply chain security. Let's take that one. What's the bad news? Bad news is that they're not ready to become a career public official and embark on that journey. It's just too difficult. It's prohibitive. And oh, by the way, they're not political. And so I can't take them through a traditional political hiring process. That is what this is designed to do. It's designed to bring in people who have subject matter expertise with the same level of standards across the board that any other government employee would be faced with, but allow us to hire them in a way that's competitive and timely.
No, absolutely. And you know I care a lot about the Western Hemisphere, obviously born in the southern part of the hemisphere and now live in the northern part of the hemisphere. So what XM Bank can do to transform the hemisphere, because I think when we talk about this topic of migration, illegal migration, we get into it. Obviously, we're in this DHS shutdown. But ultimately, the best way to do it is to have American companies investing in countries where we benefit from that investment here, and those companies benefit from those investments in Latin American countries. For example, El Salvador, which I know is, by the way, I think you could run for president of El Salvador and beat Bukele. They love you guys down there so much because of the great work you're doing there. And I think that's transforming because you're giving those people opportunities and it benefits, everybody wins, which is what we want. So do you want to just take a few minutes and comment on what your view is of how we can really push China out of our hemisphere, which is the way it used to be for a long time?
Western Hemisphere is mission critical. And for the first time, I think, in XM history, we've actually brought the national security strategy into our credit and underwriting discussions. And so a big part of it is not just the Western Hemisphere, but economic security that could be better forged with closer ties with the Western Hemisphere. So that's a very clear way we're doing it. Second, I think it's worth actually bringing it alive with a story. The president asked me to go down to Bolivia for President Paz's inauguration. And so we saw firsthand the excitement after 25 years of corrosive, far left, corrupt leadership. They were eager and thirsty for a closer economic relationship with the United States. One of the first things I encountered was actually a fuel line. And these weren't big industry trucks waiting for fuel. These were everyday Bolivians waiting for a little bit of diesel with a canister. And so what we're trying to do is say, how can energy molecules from the United States make their lives better and solidify that relationship, because it's going to pay dividends for us well into the future.
And I know I'm over time, but just 5-second question. Which country on the planet has the most foreign direct investment today?
The United States.
There you go.
Senator Warren.
I'd first of all just want to ask my colleagues and staff, could we check whether that was really Bernie Moreno or whether that was a Bernie Moreno bot? He was kind.
I try to be unpredictable.
He was kind, gentle, obsequious.
Don't use words like that. ESL over here. I got to look that up now.
What a new and improved Moreno. God. All right. Well, Chairman Yovanovitch, I got a little intro, so bear with me. I strongly believe in XM, and I'm working right now with Senator Kramer, and I know this is supported by most all of the committee, that we will try to put in place a long-term, we hope 10-year reauthorization, so we don't have to go through all the hoops. And echoing what others have said, over the last decade, XM has provided over $900 million in total financing in Virginia. It's helped over $1 billion of goods, over 50 small businesses. That does include, in my state, a fiber optic cable company in Roanoke, a specialty mining equipment manufacturer in Tazewell, an aerospace supplier in Ashburn. Additionally, you've helped us export Virginia cultural resources like our bourbon and our Bone Doctor barbecue. So we're glad to have that bourbon and barbecue around. But we all know, and everybody's echoed this, we start a bit behind, particularly versus China, in terms of the amount of resources that they are putting into their export support activities. Matter of fact, even Brazil has a much higher per capita export agency than we do in the United States. So we've got to make sure you've got the resources and the personnel, and I would echo what Senator Moreno said, making sure you hire the best people. One of the things that we have seen repeatedly, and I know you've only been in the job for a short period of time so far, but there was so much bureaucracy and hoops to jump through versus our competitors, whether they be the Europeans, the South Americans, or the Chinese. So if we're going to try to increase the bank's competitiveness, are you looking at, and this is an area I will candidly agree, I agree with Senator Moreno a lot, we've got to make the bureaucratic process a lot easier. What kind of steps are you taking to make sure the bank is more competitive?
Yeah. Senator Warren, thank you for your continued leadership and support of XM. Thank you for your co-sponsoring of the legislation that's being discussed. Good news first.
Well, lead sponsoring with my co-sponsor.
Of course. Forgive
He's
me.
not here, so I can say that.
I didn't grow up in the Senate, so these nuances are lost on me sometimes. I apologize.
But you do know what the word obsequious means, right?
That I do. He's looking it up. First things first, we have a tremendous amount of momentum. To your first point, we have more authorizations slated for this year than ever in our history. We're supporting more jobs than we ever have in 92 years. We're doubling many of the programs that you've described. We're quadrupling the pipeline on CTEP and other key programs. So you're helping us at the right time.
Can you talk for a minute about what you've done process-wise?
Absolutely. Okay. So first things first, everybody says they need more people and they need more resources to deliver better. Over the course of my career, I've learned that if you don't build on a solid foundation, throwing more resources at the problem doesn't help. And so what we did is we spent our first 100 days reevaluating all of our efforts. You know, the old, how does a bill become a law, right? The cartoon. We spent, how does an opportunity that comes into the bank navigate its way through the process and become a board-approved transaction that gets finalized, where we have definitive documentation and money goes out the door. We reviewed every step of it. What we
So
found,
you actually, in that process, say grants have to go through a CR process as well, and you have to stall the whole process for months on end just because we couldn't get our act together?
far from it. But I think what you're getting at is that there are silos that are created along the way where there isn't joint accountability and there isn't several accountability, right? And so along the way, what we've really tried to do is set people up for success by giving them 4 strategic priorities, right? It's hard to come to work every day, Senator Warner, and not know what's a priority and what's important. Number 2, we've actually created goals for every single person on our team. Everybody wants to win, they just want to know how. And lastly, we've talked about how do we better communicate and how do we better hold ourselves accountable, not just to Congress, not just to the American taxpayer, but also people who want to use the bank. We are a customer, client, user-served institution. And if we can't help them, we can't achieve our national economic and other security goals either.
My time's expired, but I wanted to put a plug in. I know others have raised this, but I'm really grateful for what you're trying to do with nuclear. I think we need to make sure on a national security basis, SMRs are part, but my time's expired.
Thank you, I agree.
Senator Britt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Warner, since Senator Marino was on such I'm going to yield for a little bit more time for him.
I just have a literally 3-second question, I think maybe for discussion to the ranking member, and the chairman's not here, but should we think about a permanent reauthorization since this is something that we should think of? I'm not saying we don't need an answer, but just for us to all kind of stew about, maybe let's just make this thing permanent. Yeah, talk about that. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you,
I
Senator
thought you were
Marino.
going to give us a definition of a particular word or something.
Almost. Maybe by the end. Maybe by the end. Thank you so much for being here. As you know, there have been a multitude of criticisms over the years with regards to the bank, many of which were levied by my former boss, whose seat I hold right now, but specifically around things like the selection of beneficiaries and why certain transactions or companies are prioritized over others, as any well risk management practices, because ultimately, you know, taxpayers are on the hook. And so how are we making sure that we're doing this the right way? I know that you have spent a lot of time on that, and many of those criticisms were before your time at the bank. But I do want to highlight that thinking and want you to just respond to some of the things that are in place right now, or that you plan to do to make sure that we don't go backwards, but yet create the conditions where we're not picking winners and losers in the future.
Sure. Senator Britt, thank you. And I think it's also ironic that many of my senior-most leaders grew up on that same Senate staff. And so
That's exactly right.
I
I'm
joke.
glad to see them all here today.
Yeah, this is my chief of staff, Alyssa Pettis' road to Damascus.
That's exactly.
Exim.
When she's the best, by the way. You've got a really good one.
She's fantastic. I'm grateful for her every day. What are we doing? We're ensuring that accountability and transparency really matters. And so we're letting the numbers speak for themselves. We're ensuring that nearly 90% of what we do serves small, medium-sized companies. 95% of businesses in America are small, medium-sized businesses.
Right.
We can't talk about supply chains without talking about all of the links, all of the chains along the way that create it. And so fundamentally, 75% of payroll in America comes from small, medium-sized businesses. All that being said, we also need to focus on the large, longer-dated strategic transactions where our 4 priorities really work. And so it's really hard, Senator Britt, to show up every day and not have a clear North Star. And so knowing that every day, and if you stop anybody, I invite you to come over to our offices anytime. If you stop anybody in the hallway and ask, what are XM's 4 strategic priorities? I promise they'll be able to tell you.
That's great. No, keep going.
No, it's really about how do we help American companies win all around the world and companies manufacturing in America. So as you know, many of the biggest manufacturers in Alabama are foreign companies that have set up operations here that employ people.
So you just mentioned, obviously, all around the world, we know the threats that are coming from the CCP. We also know how they consistently undermine, in my belief, the American worker and American innovation, and want to make sure that, you know, we're not giving state subsidies that ultimately are helpful to them. Can you talk to me about any reforms at the bank that will ensure that the China competition tools are right-sized, just so that we're looking at that with a clear lens?
Yeah, absolutely. When I sat here about a year ago for my confirmation hearing, I said something really important, I think, that I've lived up to, which is CTEP was an appendage when I arrived at the bank. It was something that was siloed off to the side that we thought of as almost kind of a little mini operation in and of itself. One of the first things I did was actually bring it to the core of everything we do, including bringing the individual who leads CTEP and promoting her to be the global head of all origination and business development. And so everything is looked at through that lens, because those 10 key strategic sectors for which we need the people, we need the assurances, we need the visibility, that's going to help us win.
And I know I only have a little time left, but I know you may be familiar with the University of Alabama's International Trade Center, which has a key focus on small business exports. The Trade Center is not only a critical part of the workforce and workforce development pipeline in the great state of Alabama, but it has successfully assisted numerous small businesses with developing global export strategies. Can you just comment on this and any other initiatives that you are doing that would help us better utilize the current capabilities that we have and continue to support small business exporters, as you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. I'm very familiar with the Institute. I can't walk from my office to the water cooler without bumping into somebody from Alabama.
I love it. I love
they
it.
make sure I know about it. Fundamentally, we want to craft a team and an approach that ensures that the small businesses are not just represented, but they're thriving. And so coming back to my comments on the community lenders, I think it's important to build out that program because they know these small, medium-sized businesses better than I ever will.
That's right. And small business are what makes our main streets and our communities thrive. So thank you so much, and congratulations on having such an outstanding chief of staff.
Thank you.
Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Chairman. It's great to see you. Thank you for being here. I want to start out by, I so appreciate Exim's direct engagement in Nevada as it applies to our critical mineral supply chain, and specifically your work with American Battery Technologies lithium mine. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but since I want to follow up on CTEP a little bit here. I was pleased to join Senator Rounds in introducing the Strengthening Exports Against China Act, S753. We've been talking about that. What it essentially does is it effectively eliminates any projects from the Exim's 2% default rate cap. And if you would, please talk a little bit about how that 2% default rate cap has affected the success of CTEP projects.
With the current formulation in place, it creates the wrong incentives. What I mean by that is that it dissuades us from looking at longer-term strategic transactions that would better suit our risk-reward profile and create a portfolio effect. And so there's a constant looming fear that if we hit the 2%, that the bank will be adversely impacted and shut down the way it was between 2015 and 2019, as Senator Warren said in her remarks. And we are still clearing through the scar tissue left over. And so what's really important, and that's why we've asked it in our 3 very simple requests here today, is that we're not asking to move the goalposts. Keep us accountable to the same number, but let us return to the same risk management system that worked for 81 plus years, and let us do it in partnership with you.
Thank you. And you talk a little bit about why it's important for Exim to support projects like Nevada's lithium mine. We just talked a little bit in critical minerals.
Oh, it's of the utmost importance. And we're doing so, by the way, it's worth noting, through the Make More in America program, which is not a program that we initiated. It's one that we inherited, and we're really grateful for it. But what we've done is we've supercharged it. We've more than doubled what it did last year. We have the largest ever pipeline, and a lot of it's driven by projects in Nevada, projects in Arizona, whether it's upstream, whether it's ability to refine and process, which is the critical choke point, as you well know, and I had the opportunity to speak to your staff on multiple occasions about it. It's these sort of projects that we need to actually de-risk our supply chains and make them reliable for companies large and small.
So, and I want to touch on that as well. Senator Shaheen Young and Senator Rounds again have, we've introduced the Secure Minerals Act, which would ensure Exim financing for a critical mineral reserve. That's S3659. I want to talk a little bit about the Critical Minerals Resiliency Project Vault. A couple of things. Is Exim taking the lead in negotiating contracts with critical mineral stakeholders for the Project Vault? Curious.
So I think it's worth noting the Secure Minerals Act, very supportive of it. I provided written testimony in support of it. Project Vault's a public-private partnership, and it's really driven by an independent company that will have the benefit of our financing. But most importantly, Senator, it's actually driven by what the manufacturers in America tell us they need, and based on the terms that they need it. And so what's really important is that our debt covenants have embedded in them the right parameters to ensure that not just the highest industry standards are adhered to, which I think is at the core of your question, but it's also that the policy motivation, if you will, behind the capital allocation is achieved.
If there are any barriers or challenges, please let us know. I'd hope you'd be talking to us about what you're seeing as we move forward here.
Absolutely will. And in fact, I've had many briefings, and our team has over 30 with members of Congress and their staff. And what we're saying at every turn is Project Vault is just the beginning of the set of solutions that we need. We need more stockpiling. We need more thought about resiliency. We need more support of small and medium-sized enterprises as they look to navigate these supply chains. And so the more, the merrier.
And the more that we pursue Project Vault, I'd also hoping that you incorporate public transparency, accountability into that process, so there is some insight, oversight, public knows what's happening as well.
Yeah. Every single one of our transactions is held to the highest standard. So whether it's $1 that goes out the door or $10 billion that goes out the door, I can assure you that it will be accountable.
Thank you. Thank you for being here again.
Thank you for your support.
Senator Haggerty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, it's good to see you. And I've been very pleased with the reinvigoration of the Exim Bank under your leadership. I'm particularly pleased at your focus on small and medium-sized businesses. I think that's just a testament to your capability, because you've demonstrated that America First does not come at the expense of our allies, nor does it come at the expense of our strategic competition with our adversaries. I've been very pleased with the posture that you've adopted. I'm the chairman of the National Security and International Trade and Finance Subcommittee of this committee. And in that role, I'm very interested in finding opportunities to advance our economic edge, and in any way that would do so that also advances our national security. Senator Cortez Masto and I work closely together on critical minerals, and pleased to see the focus that you're undertaking as well. I'd like to talk a bit and get your perspective a bit on critical minerals. You know how important they are from vital elements of our national security, the role that they play in technologies ranging from fighter jets all the way to cell phones that we all carry. As you think about it, the United States and our allies currently lack the access that we need to these critical minerals. And it's certainly a national security issue for us. And if you could just talk to us about how the Exim Bank is going to help manufacturers of these critical technologies advance their interest in getting access to these critical minerals.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator Haggerty, and thank you for your support. Coincidentally, the answer plays right back into your opening remarks about working with our strategic allies. And so I spent all of last weekend actually in Tokyo, where we convened 18 countries to discuss energy and supply chain security matters. And so what we found consistently, every time I talk about whether it's Project Vault, whether I talk about mines in Nevada or in Arizona or processing facilities in Western Pennsylvania, it comes back to how do we work together and bring our puzzle pieces together to solve the issue at hand. Yeah. And let's be clear about defining the problem. The problem is that we all have become over-reliant on supply chains and markets that aren't free, that aren't fair, and they certainly aren't functioning. And so the only way we're going to be able to do so is by reindustrializing America, ensuring that we have what we need here to absorb those supply shocks, whether that's via stockpiling efforts like Project Vault, or it's upstream and midstream investments like we have in some of the states I mentioned, but it's also ensuring that we work together with our allies. So another example is Australia. The supply chain security framework that Prime Minister Albanese and President Trump signed, the bulk of the non-military cooperation were actually Exim transactions. And so what we're looking for is ways in which we can work together, use all of our tools simultaneously, whether they're export or import oriented, to strengthen these supply chains.
Can you just expand a bit on how, as you deploy these tools, how we ensure that U.S. financing doesn't somehow wind up in China, or benefiting China, I should say.
Yeah. And this is where CTEP is critically important. And this is why I brought the CTEP program into the nucleus of everything we do. And it's actually at the first step in the process of being assessed at the bank. And so what we're ensuring is that everything that we do, every dollar that we deploy, is helping with American competitiveness and helps put American workers first.
Well, let's stay on CTEP for a minute because energy is absolutely critical. And as we think about reauthorizing XM, what is it that you think we could do to best support America's energy industry here?
The best thing you could do is send a very clear bipartisan signal to the market, every corner of the globe, that XM is here to stay, that it will enjoy the same risk management parameters that made it thrive for 81 plus of its 92 years, and that we will be able to go out and hire competitively the best subject matter experts we need to deliver on our objectives.
You know, I'm from Tennessee and have a strong interest in nuclear energy. Would you think that it would be helpful to include nuclear energy in CTEP's mandate? Would that help the flexibility that you need?
We welcome any and all tools that will help give us more. More is more. But coincidentally, having the risk management parameters that we've asked for today will probably be as, or if not more, helpful in certain instances in helping us achieve the wins in the nuclear side. Because it's exactly those longer-term strategic transactions that are hurt by today's parameters. And again, the current state of affairs is a recent development. For 81 plus years, we operated and thrived under sensible ones that are way more conservative than any private sector peer that we have. Returning to those will help us win in nuclear.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Gallego.
So XM has been a very powerful tool here in Arizona. You keep mentioning it, so thank you again. Over the last decade, the bank has authorized $460 million in financing, supporting $3 billion in Arizona exports, including transactions with also small businesses. I think people forget the effort it has there too. And the Make More in America initiative is really key to reaching those small businesses. So I'm also here working to codify that. But I don't want to just lock in on what exists today. I really want to strengthen it. And what enhancements should Congress make to MMI to maximize its impact on all small business exports and job creation, in your opinion, or your office's opinion?
Yeah. So, Senator Gallego, thank you for your continued support and for championing not just XM, but a lot of very sensible legislation that will continue to help us.
My pleasure.
And in fact, I just returned from the annual Sarah Energy Conference in Houston late last night, where one of my last meetings was actually with the CEO of a large copper project in Arizona. So we're pushing all of that forward. What's really critical with Make More in America is our ability to actually send the signal to the market that we're here to stay. Because what we're dealing with on the Make More in America side is we're actually working with some of the largest companies in the world that want to, perhaps sometimes for the first time, set up operations in America. And so they're very cognizant of all the scar tissue that I've mentioned, of having the bank shut down or having the bank having this looming threat of shutdown, that infant mortality for a 92-year-old institution I mentioned. The best thing we could do for Make More in America is actually not just reauthorize XM, but do so in the sensible parameters that we've asked for.
So my understanding is so far there's about 12 transactions that have completed under the MMI to date. I mean, that seems kind of low. So are we seeing kind of a demand problem, as in like small businesses aren't finding or applying to the program? Or is it a supply problem on the financing and approval side? Or, so where's the bottleneck that we're seeing?
Yeah, honestly, it's been just a sense of timing. I think that when we inherited the program, it was probably only about a year old. The first thing we did is throw it into high gear. We doubled the amount of transactions done in MMIA. I'm proud to say today that our pipeline is 4 times larger. And so we're actively looking for ways to make it a priority. And by the way, it fits into nearly every one of our 4 strategic priorities because it's helping exporters in America win. A lot of this has to do with energy security. Nearly all of it has to do with supply chain security. And finally, we're starting to see more transactions, Senator Gallego, that touch on the industries of the future, whether it's artificial intelligence, dual-use technology, advanced manufacturing. That's really kind of where all of this is going.
And how many are currently in the pipeline, would you say?
I actually
Roughly.
I have that number now.
You do have that, okay, great.
I'll dig it up. Give me 1 moment.
Yep. You
can
got
ask
2
another-
minutes and 10 seconds.
You can ask another question if you want. I'll dig it up.
We can see that. Well, kind of been mentioned here, everyone kind of took my thunder. I'm really also obviously very much interested in SMRs. As you know, Arizona is a nuclear state. We have 30% of nuclear generation actually comes from Palo Verde Nuclear Power Plant. And I do think the deployment of SMRs can be a very big game changer, both on the the green side, making sure we have no carbon energy, as well as on the economic side, having baseload energy that is consistent and can also ramp up as demand grows. So can you explain to me maybe what is the intersection that we could potentially have with XM and SMRs and how we can work together to get that industry going?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a tremendous amount of demand for U.S.-led nuclear technology from every corner of the globe. Not all of it is the large scale, as you very well mentioned. A lot of it is SMR-oriented. And so the best thing that we could do is provide them the certainty that we could look at long-dated strategic transactions that do have some technology risks, Senator Gallego.
Yep.
And so giving them that up. And by the way, this is a great area where simply relying on private capital providers alone without some of our participation just isn't going to cut it. It isn't going to make it. And so I want to come back to your MMIA question. Although I don't have the number of transactions, I probably have a more helpful statistic. We inherited the program where there was $500 million worth of authorizations, give or take. Today, the pipeline is nearly $8 billion. Okay. So it's 16 times larger than what we inherited, and we want it to grow even more. And by the way, it's always helpful to know how many opportunities we have, but it's actually important to know the size, because sometimes these are the largest transactions that require a tremendous amount of due diligence, but they employ the greatest number of people.
Right. Thank you. Look forward to continuing our work together. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, Mr. Jovanovic, I think you have run the gambit today. Those are all of the speakers that I think and members that wanted to discuss this with you. We appreciate your participation in the meeting today. With that, for senators who wish to submit questions for the record, for the hearing record, those questions are due 1 week from today on Thursday, April 2nd. Chairman, once again, you have 45 days from that day to submit your responses to questions for the record. Thank you, and with that, the committee is adjourned.
Thank you all very much.